Welcome everyone, I'm Dr. Sam Spinelli, physical therapist, strength and conditioning coach with Sis Athletics. And today we're going to be going through the best landmine exercises. I'm a huge fan of the landmine. I think that it is a great piece of equipment that we can use to enhance certain exercises or do other exercises that we otherwise couldn't do. Now, if you don't know what the landmine is, it's basically where we take a barbell and we fix one end, either in a corner with a certain type of landmine attachment or some sort of other setup like that, which we'll discuss. And then the other end is free to move. By doing so, it allows the movements that we do with it to have a little bit more stability because of the one end fixed. It also gives a unique arcing motion that can really enhance certain movements and allow us to feel certain muscles better and give a different angle of pattern to work off of than usual. The moves that we're going to go through are ones that we are huge fans of and we regularly program in our sustainable strength program. So for anyone who would like to see that program, I'll link it down in the description box below and you can check it out. So let's get into the movements first, and then after all of the movements, we'll give you a few different ways that you can set up a landmine if you've never done so. So let's check out our first movement. The first movement we're going to check out is the landmine squat, sometimes called a landmine goblet squat or various other names. And it's where we essentially just hold the landmine to our chest and then squat down. When you're setting it up, you can try to think to have your feet in line where you have the balls of your feet by the edges of the barbell on the ground. That's a rough, good place, but you have to play around with what feels best for you. And you're going to want to lean forward into the landmine attachment. That way, you're able to have a nice, good quad dominant style squat. If you want to have a more hip dominant style, you can just shift your hips back more and stand a little bit closer to the attachment. Now we can do the same thing and we can do a reverse lunge though, where we keep that goblet style grip. You can keep your foot position relatively similar, but you want to have a little bit more narrow stance than you were for the squat. We can also do a reverse lunge with the landmine where we keep the attachment down by our side, just like if we were holding a dumbbell. This can be a really good option for loading up the movement a little bit better than we would normally with a dumbbell. If you have a challenge with the grip, you can just use a strap to reduce the demand on grip and focus on loading up your legs. Now for people that want a little bit more of a challenge, while sticking with the single leg options, we can do a skater squat. This is where we're going to be holding the landmine attachment to our chest again, and then we're going to be stepping back like we were for the reverse lunge. We don't let our rear foot touch the ground. So we go back, have our knee touch a pad, and then come back up. This can be a very challenging option, but it's a really good way to load up the skater squat because it gives you that extra stability by having the other end fixed, and you can press back into it on your way up. Now going into a different plane of motion, we can do the lateral squat. So we set up similar to the initial squat we were discussing, and we take our feet wider, and then we go down and sit off to the side while keeping our other leg straight. This allows us to work our adductors and our glutes to a little bit higher degree, hitting up that frontal plane motion. Now working in a slightly different direction, we can do the curtsy lunge. You could do this facing the attachment, but I personally find that by facing sideways or perpendicular to the attachment, we can get a much better motion and a better feel of the movement. This can be a really solid glute exercise, and for athletes that work in different planes, particularly ones like hockey, where they have to do crossovers, this can be a phenomenal exercise to strengthen that. Now shifting back over into the lunge style motion that we initially looked at, we can go into a lunge to press. This is where we're going to hold the landmine attachment in a one rack position, and then as we step up, we're going to press up. So you're going to step back, step forward, and press. This is a combination exercise and be a great one that if you're doing some sort of metabolic type work, can be an excellent option. Building off this, we can go to a thruster. So this is where instead of doing a lunge, we do a squat into a press. You can either do this with two hands, as shown here. Now, making this a little bit more dynamic and something that a lot of times can be beneficial for some athletes is doing the rotational squat to press. This is where we set up perpendicular to it, squat down, holding the bar with our outside arm, and then as we come up, we rotate and press. You're going to repeat going back and forth, working on trying to have those feet pivot and explode up on the way to the top. Now, if you want to build on this even more, you can go into the rotational lift to press. This is where we're going to be dynamically rotating to a higher degree, bringing that bar down to the ground, lifting it, twisting in the space, and then pressing. You can either do it with two arms attached on, and that way you have a little bit more security and not trying to work on having your hand placement switch, or you can have it switching your hands as you rotate and then go into the press. Now we can also do more than just lunging motions and pressing motions. We also do row variations. In fact, that's one of the things that I think the landmine is phenomenal for. And as you can see here with the T-bar row, this classic exercise has been very popular for a long time, but there's a lot of other ways we can also row with it, such as doing a one-arm row where we come off to the side and hold it with one arm. Now, a challenge with this for a lot of individuals is that if you have plates on the end, you can have your range of motion limited. And that's where we can go over to the perpendicular row as you see here. In the perpendicular row, we're set up and we're able to work on having the end of the barbell come up towards our side and not have the plates hit us. This can be a way to really work the upper back to a higher degree as that arcing motion comes out to the side, challenging our posterior delt and our scapular muscles to a good degree. Shifting over, we can also work the core, and a big way that I like to do this is with an exercise called a standing twist. So here we're going to have our arms straight and we're going to be twisting side to side, having our feet pivot as we do so. In this version, we're just going to bring the bar down to our thighs and then back up. If you want to try and challenge that to an even higher degree and use a little bit more motion, you can do the twist and lunge. That's right, a twist and lunge, folks. We're going to be bringing it down all the way to the ground and then flipping it through in space and bringing it around to the other side and lunge again. So the goal here is that we're going to be utilizing a similar type of motion as we did with the standing twist. We're going to be bringing that plate all the way down to the ground and then twist through there. Generally, you're going to keep your arms relatively straight for this, but they can start to bend as you go through the top motion. Just that way, there's not this huge, crazy arc. Now, if you want to try and do a little bit more dynamic motion, you can also try the landmine snatch. This is where we're going to go perpendicular to the attachment point, and we're going to be grabbing our grip, and then we're going to be exploding up and punching out to the side. In contrast to a normal snatch, which requires a lot of technique, this one you can get away with relatively minimal practice. Because the implement is out to our side and it flows around us really easily, you don't have to worry about trying to maneuver your body around the bar as much. Now, if you want to try loading up the movement more and doing some more strength-based exercises for the posterior chain, the RDL is a great option. Something that I like about doing it with the landmine attachment is that by going down to the bottom position, it helps to encourage us to shift back posteriorly, loading up our glutes and hamstrings. A lot of times when people do a deadlift, they go straight up and down and not having a more of a posterior shift, and sometimes that can load the back more than individuals are comfortable with. And so with this version, we can really load up the glutes and hamstrings. You can also do a single leg version of this, having the leg come free and move back in space. Generally, this is a pretty good option, but I actually like setting this up with a perpendicular style here instead. The reason for this is that as you go down, that arcing motion encourages the bar to come across, loading up the glutes to an even higher degree, because now we get a little bit of hip rotation work challenged, which works the glutes to challenge them as you come back up out of the movement. Some people are going to struggle with the balance aspect of that movement, and so what you can do is a staggered perpendicular single leg deadlift here instead. That's where you just keep the one foot down on the ground. Generally, you're going to keep that foot close by, and it allows you just to reduce the balance demand and focus on challenging your muscles to a higher degree. We can also start to work on pressing strength too in a more focused way. So the one arm press in the standing position is a common version that's utilized for this, and a benefit of this is that a lot of people struggle with true overhead pressing, and this is sort of a pseudo horizontal and overhead press, because it starts off in an overhead press style position, but as you go up with the arcing motion, it ends up going forward, so it doesn't end up being a true shoulder press, which can be a little bit easier on some individual shoulders. We can also do this in a half kneeling position, which I'm a huge fan of, particularly as we start to progress to a more overhead position, because now you can start to lean forward as you finish the movement, and working on grading your exposure to that overhead position. Another fun option is to go into a tall kneeling position and go from side to side working on pressing that. This can be a good one, particularly for those that want to work on a little bit more power based as you press up, switch hands, press up, and switch hands. We can also do the one arm press squat hold. This is where we maintain the bottom position of a squat and we press up overhead with just one arm. If you want to work a little bit more of that dynamic action as we looked with the tall kneeling version, we can also do that in the squat, where now we hold the squat, we do a side to side press. If you want to focus on challenging your stomach to a higher degree, we can shift over to a Z press. This is where we're going to be sitting down, maintaining an upright sitting position, and then press overhead. With the landmine version here, this can be a very challenging action for the abs as you have to resist falling backwards. If you want to put even more focus on the abdominals, we can do the sit-up to one arm press. This is where we go down, we sit up, and then we go into a Z press. So essentially it's like that motion combined with the sit-up. You end up using less weight for pressing, so it's not necessarily the best shoulder exercise, but it's a more challenging abdominal exercise. So it's a nice in-between point. If you want a little bit more challenging trunk exercise, you can do the Russian twist with this. And so that's where you're gonna be in a sitting position, feet lifted up generally, and then from here going side to side, twisting while facing the anchor point. Now, if you want to work on some power, we can do the push press. Generally, you'll see individuals would do this with either feet symmetrical, or you can do it with a slight stagger. I think that's a really good option for most people. It's going to be a little bit awkward keeping your feet symmetrical. Then you can build off this and go into a push jerk. That can be a really good option for a lot of people trying to work on power that don't necessarily have the skills to do a true barbell push jerk. Similarly, we can go to the split jerk, where now we progress and we drive up and then split positions. I really like this for a lot of athletes who aren't necessarily true barbell sport athletes, because we can use this without a lot of technical work for the jerk. And then a few other core exercises that I think are awesome are these anti-rotational twists. So this is where we take our arms side to side, but we resist motion at our trunk. So we're trying to keep our chest pointing towards the anchor point the whole time. So you can do this in a standing position. You can also do this in a half kneeling position. And you can also do this in a squat hold, each of which are very challenging options and can light up your trunk. Now, shifting over to more isolation-based exercises, we can look at the lateral raise with the landmine. I think this is a great exercise for a lot of people, as we can use this to hit up each of the heads of the delt in one single motion, because we go through the front, side, and a little bit of posterior direction. We can also hit the glutes and hammies. We're going to do a kickback in a quadruped position with the landmine sitting against the backside of our knees, and we kick back and up. You can flip over and you can do a single leg hip thrust as well. This adds a little interesting dynamic to the single leg hip thrust, where now it increases the challenge on resisting and rotating as you go up and down. If you want to work the quads, you can do a hack squat. And this is where you're going to have your back against it. It's something that we actually discussed in a previous video that I'll link down below. And building off that, one that we're huge fans of is the sissy squat, with your facing the anchor point. Here, this is a great way to really challenge the quads and the abs. And then to finish this up, we got the calf raise. Here, we're going to be blowing up those calves because we've got a nice, steady, stable surface that we can press against and lean into the motion as you drive up. Okay, so now that's at least 50 versions of movements that you can do with the landmine. It's going to give you a ton of different options, whether you're working on power, strength, hypertrophy, endurance, maybe some combination exercises for a burnout, anything like that. We got you covered here. Now we want to discuss different ways that you can set this up. A lot of times you'll see individuals who try to set this up by putting a barbell fixed into the corner. Well, that's not inherently a bad thing. It can be an issue, particularly if you don't want to damage the walls, because what happens is you're going side to side, the barbell is going to be pressing in against, and it can damage the walls, so it's not an ideal thing for most situations. You can mitigate this by putting a towel around the barbell and letting it sit in the corner, but again, not necessarily the best solution. So that's where a few other things come in. Number one is having a dedicated actual landmine attachment. You can pick these up either as a flat plate on the ground, as a plate loaded option, or as something secured to an actual rack. They're not necessarily very expensive, and you can pick them up relatively easily. If you don't have that, then you can set up two heavy rubber coated dumbbells against each other, so they set up as an angle, and then you can secure the barbell against that. Hopefully that gave you a lot of different ideas to start crushing some workouts with the landmine. If you want to have more ideas, check out the link down below for the workouts that we offer. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.